is November 19th, and this is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We're continuing our meeting, and we're in hybrid form. So some of our members are here and some of our members are Zooming, and I think our witnesses are pretty much out online. So this afternoon, we have two things we want to look at. One is the very recent denial by the Development Review Board of the Beckett facility. And I did ask Peggy to put that legal document up on our webpage so we could see it. And then, as we know, the Beckett facility was designed to replace Woodside for children with concerns and to provide a safe therapeutic environment for those kids. And so the Department of Children and Families has been doing a lot of work and planning on that. And I invited Commissioner Brown in just to give us a sense of where we've been and what this denial might mean. But I am also very aware that this is a legal document and it has just come out, and that the department may not have established a firm position as yet. And that's pretty typical when something like this happens. So for those of you who are looking for in-depth analysis, probably isn't going to happen today, but I'll let Commissioner Brown tell us about that and if that's possible. So Commissioner Brown, thank you for being with us. And if you, all right. Please go right ahead. As I said, we have this denial from the DRB, and can you let us know what it means for the plans that have been put in place in terms of getting these kids into a safe therapeutic environment, and then what the department might be thinking going forward?
Sure. And just to provide some background to the committee, that there are two proceedings that were happening pretty much at the same time. One was we applied for a local permit with the town of Newbury with the Development Review Board, and then also with the Act 250 Commission for a land use permit as well. We're expecting the Act 250 decision relatively near future. And as you indicated, we have received a decision from the Development Review Board. We're disappointed in that decision. And, you know, and while it, as you indicated, it is a legal document, and any challenge to it would be a legal process, I do want to share with the committee that we believe there is basis for an appeal, and we are planning to appeal along with Beckett the Development Review Board decision to the environmental court.
Questions?
Sean, Commissioner, I apologize. I was having trouble hearing because the volume was very low. Could you give a summary of what you just said, because I can't respond?
Sure, I indicated that, you know, there were dual processes that had been moved forward during the fall. One was our request for a local permit with the Development Review Board in the town of Newbury, a zoning permit. And then also we filed for an updated Act 250 permit for the project as well. As you've indicated, we did receive a decision from the Development Review Board in Newbury. It was a denial. We're disappointed in that, and we believe there's grounds for appeal, and we will be appealing the decision. We are still awaiting the decision from the Act 250 Commission for the land use permit. And we believe that with the appeal to the environmental court, a process that could take between 4 to 6 months, depending on the length of the proceeding. And in the meantime, we will be contingency planning to how to continue to meet the needs of the youth that need this level of treatment. That work has not stopped actually even during this process, and so we'll continue to evaluate options, short-term and midterm, as we continue to move forward. We still believe this is the right location for this facility in this program. We believe it's the right building. We believe it's the right programming to meet the needs of the youth that will be provided. And we believe it's the right provider to provide that treatment in working with Beckett.
So just to summarize, then, it sounds like there will be an appeal of this denial.
Yes.
Well, okay. So that decision has been made. I didn't want to pressure you into speaking to that, but at this point, the department and the agency will be appealing the Development Review Board and its denial based on the planning and the belief that this is the right place for these kids.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Senator Sears has a question.
I'm not sure it's a question, but given the fact that it would take up to 6 months for the appeal to go through, and we don't know if you'd be successful or not successful, and given that it would take probably another 6 months to do the construction upgrades necessary, we're talking now about maybe even 2023 before we have a facility. Has there been any now the question, so that's the comment. The question is, few of us have been chatting about other alternative locations. One being the Windsor former prison farm, where there are some buildings there that could be either operated, by the state or whatever. I'd leave that to you all. But it seems to me that being at least a year out before we can even begin with Beckett, and given the pressures that COVID, as well as not having a secure facility for these kids, it's just created more problems. And I will grant that this was a prior commissioner and a prior secretary. Some of the idea about closing Woodside and going private was that we'd be able to collect Medicaid money. That is not going to be possible. And I'm just curious if there's any planning going on. I think you're going to get this question from a number of legislators when we get back in January for an alternative. It just, waiting another year really troubles me, knowing and it must trouble you too, Commissioner, knowing the impact that's had on your system of care.
It does, Senator, and that's why we're very disappointed in the decision. We have in the past, the BGS, Buildings and General Services, has looked at the Windsor facility that you mentioned and determined it wasn't feasible. That would take a significant amount of investment to make that usable for the needs that we have to serve the youth that we could place there. We have met recently with BGS and asked them once again to conduct a new search to see if there's a property that can be located and utilized either in the short term or the midterm. They have done that for us in the past, as well as when we were doing the initial work on the plan we submitted last fall to the legislature to see if there were any other facilities that could be used for this type of program. They were not able to locate one at that time, is my understanding. We've asked them to go back out and conduct a new search. Because I agree with you. We do not like that youth that need this level of care. In many times, situations are being sent out of state. We believe that all Vermonters facing mental health crises, and including our children, have the right to dignified care, housing, and education. And this decision puts that at risk for our kids that need this level of care. And so, we're continuing to problem solve to see if there's other alternatives in the short term, because waiting for a year creates challenges. And so we are looking at other alternatives right now. And
I'm glad to hear you're looking at other alternatives, but I think that personally, it's time to have a serious conversation. I did, talk with retired Judge Grisham before he retired about the process of sending a kid to, particularly Sununu, when you have a very dangerous young person, and where do you put them? And it takes sometimes a week to get through the court process, but my understanding is that's federal law, and we can't supersede that in terms of sending a youngster out of state. So I think that for all the reasons that you mentioned, that we've talked about for the last I think it's been over a year we've been discussing this, maybe more. I know I remember meetings in the governor's office with then Commissioner Schatz, then Secretary Gobey, and Representative Pugh and others. When the decision was made to close Woodside, we had every expectation that we'd already be in a new facility by now. I just, the pressure it's putting on your system. And I just think we need to have even if the appeal is successful, it wouldn't hurt to have a plan B at this point that we could move on rather quickly. I don't know what the cost is, but my understanding was it was about $3 million the state was going to put into the Beckett facility.
Yeah, and with the cost of construction materials, that cost has gone up a bit.
So, it's not that, if we had a facility that needed some upgrade, it's not, it would be almost a wash instead of that money somewhere else. That's just my opinion, but I'm sure it'll be discussed more when we get back in session. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Sears, for the question. That was actually a question. My question was, what's Plan B? And then in addition to the Plan B question, of course, there are some kids who are not adjudicated, who are also affected by this. So the facility, as you have said in the past, was to be utilized not just for children who are adjudicated, but also others outside of the judiciary. And it would be helpful, I think, for us to understand what's happening with both cohorts, both groups of kids right now.
Yeah, so we use a wide variety of programming to serve our youth, whether they're justice involved youth or CHINS involved youth, Senator. Some are receiving, staying in, with their family and receiving services there. Others might be with foster families and receiving services there and in the community. Others are receiving services in Vermont in residential treatment programs located throughout Vermont. And then we also have children receiving services out of state, that meet their very specific needs. And so we use a wide variety of programming to meet the needs. As Senator Sears indicated, the pandemic has certainly stressed that system. And right now, we've been working with some of our key programs to make sure we can ensure capacity and the needs of our kids are being met, similar to what's happening in the healthcare system. We are utilizing healthcare stabilization funds to provide to some of our residential treatment programs to help them meet the needs of their staffing needs, of paying more to retain staff and to recruit staff, also bringing in traveling, contracted traveling resources, in providing them to our programs as well to help them to ensure that they can stay open and staffed to meet the needs of youth. And then also, we're going through what's the rate setting process where we can provide extraordinary financial relief. And so we're utilizing a wide variety of tools right now to ensure that we're stabilizing our system of care for all of our youth, just given the impacts we're seeing in terms of staffing and that the pandemic has had on our program's ability to stay open. And we've actually even had some of our own family services staff working in some facilities for a short period of time to help stabilize and ensure our kids have a safe place to receive services.
So I know that I'm going to have a little follow-up, and then Representative Pugh will also have a question, but it would be, again, very helpful to have a breakdown of where the kids are and which of these children are under some type of mental health support services, and how those who are have been adjudicated or are in that area are being handled. It would be nice to see a breakout of that specifically.
We have that. We can provide that to the committee.
Okay, and then finally, the number who have actually been sent out of state, because I know that's an issue as well.
Yeah, and our list that we can provide you, Senator, will have in-state and out-of-state treatment programs listed,
Okay.
and the number of youth in those programs.
All right, thank you. Representative Pugh.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner. I think my question/request follows from what Senator Sears said, followed up by what, and perhaps adding a little bit more request that Senator Lyons said. Going back to the whatever we're calling it, the Newberry proposal. When the legislature, upon your recommendation, said, yes, we needed to close Woodside, the information that we got at the time was that there were, at any given time, less than 10 Vermont youth who needed the kind of locked supervision along with treatment, and that other youth who ran into trouble or had mental health or substance use or other issues could be appropriately treated and housed in other types of facilities. The Newberry site was, my understanding, supposed to sort of take care of that small number of youth who would, if Woodside had still been there, would have been at Woodside. So as you are collecting data and as we are going to be asking for things probably on a monthly basis, sort of like other things, where are those kids? Where are those youth? And what kinds of placements are they in? What kinds of facilities? I realize I may be getting into my old-time social worker hat, which is not appropriate. But the idea of putting someone who, if there had been a Woodside, would have been in Woodside in a foster home, I find really scary, if not inappropriate. So I guess the long and short of it is adding on the things that we would like, if it is all right, Chair Lyons, to add of the universe of youth who, if we had a Woodside, if we had a locked facility where youth were treated and housed therapeutically, where are they now? Because I imagine we are having them.
Thank you. That's clarification of my question. I really appreciate it. Good.
And we can provide you that information.
I'm sorry, we didn't hear.
I was gonna say, we'd be happy to provide you that information.
Okay, thank you. All right, terrific. And when do you think we can get that information?
We'll try to get it to the committee, next week.
Okay. But not on Thanksgiving or the day before. We
Yeah,
want your,
I would get it to you by,
we would like you and your staff to have some time off as well.
Well, I mean, and I mean, I guess from my point of view, this is not a one-time request, so whatever makes sense. Sorry, if putting it together next week is too quick and you need to sort of set up a structure,
Sure.
I'd even go for December 1st.
I would too. We do have another meeting coming up to finalize our recommendations. So December 1st would not be too far away. That would
no,
be
that's
good.
fine, but we'll shoot for December 1st, but we're happy to provide the information. We appreciate the time.
All right. Other questions from the committee?
I thought the day after Thanksgiving would be perfect.
Senator Westman was asking for a Black Friday report. All right. Okay, anything else, committee? I know, I think this is a bit of a concern where the municipality has come out so strongly against the facility, and we know what the needs are for children and what the staffing needs are for our kids. So we want to hear what we've asked for, and I know that this will be a topic of conversation in various committees of jurisdiction as the session goes forward. Anything else, committee? Okay, thank you. Thank you for Senator Sears.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The one thing I'd ask Michelle to look into would be, what does the legislature have a role here? I mean, if we were to agree, if various committees looked at this, including the institutions committees, and agreed that 12 months is much too long, do we actually have a role? Because this is really truly an administrative decision.
Yes, it is.
It's locating a facility, and because it's not a state facility, it'd be locating a facility, and it's a contractual arrangement and so forth. So before we make recommendations or before the standing committees deal with it, I'd like to know what position the legislature has in this.
Good point. So Katie McClitt is here and Michelle is here on Zoom. Michelle, did you want to comment?
I got that, and I'm probably going to touch base with Becky, because Becky is the one who has dealt with this issue and the facility issue, but we'll gather in Ledge Council and we'll figure out, and we'll get back with you and let you know.
Okay, thank you. Terrific. Anything else? Anything else that we're missing? Okay, I think we're good then with the Beckett issue for now. It's really about children and how to care properly for them when they either break the law or they have some behavioral mental issues, mental health issues. Okay. So we're moving on.
Thank you.
And thank you, Commissioner. Thanks for being here.
Yep, thank you.
All right. But we will come back to the topic and recommendations, and we'll wait for Michelle to clarify and Katie to clarify the role that the legislature has to play, if at all. So Katie,
I was just gonna.
would you mind joining us? And then I thought for the last hour or so, we begin a discussion about recommendations that we might like to make to committees of jurisdiction regarding some of the areas that we've looked at during the past few months. I forget when we started. July. Do you, Katie, I think we sort of brainstormed a list of things to begin with.
So Katie McGlynn, Office of Legislative Counsel, we did brainstorm a list of topics that the committee had heard that you might want to revisit. And I think it's also worth noting that Senator Lyons and I reviewed the legislation creating this committee, and there's no formal report due. So part of the conversation that we had was the potential of putting together a letter or memo with recommendations. And there's a question of whether that should be committee specific, if it should sort of be targeted by subject area, or if the committee is creating one comprehensive document to send out to all committees affected. So that is one question on the table, is what is the format of the recommendations? In terms of potential topics that you wanted to revisit, there is the issue of IT. I believe you heard testimony this morning. There is the regulation and oversight of the non-educational components of residential programming. There is the Families First Plan, and including the question of whether to require some type of ongoing update from the administration. There is the issue of the child placement issues. This was the UVM report. And then how to address the issue of kids who have behavioral concerns, but who are not involved in the judicial system. So those are the questions that we discussed. And I'm sure folks have others.
Okay. I wonder if we can get I'm looking for the email that we shared on the list.
While you're looking for that,
Go ahead.
may I offer one of your first questions was, do we do a comprehensive, one list? Or do we identify things and send them to individual committees? Is that what I understood you to say? Well, it may be more work for folks. I personally think it might make sense to have one and then send it to each committee chair or committee with this is what the child protection team did. There are 5 recommendations. We believe the 3 fall within the jurisdiction of your committee, so that people see the universe of what we dealt with. Not a report, a list. That's my suggestion. I don't know what, and I've not talked to the chair.
Gosh. So let's start with the first question. Is it a report or is it a letter? And we're not required to have a full report, as I understand it. So I think unless someone wants to have a 20-page report, I would go with the letter. Can we agree on the letter? All right, so good. All right, so Katie, you're off the hook for the report. I was hoping you'd get the big, no. Then the list, as Representative Pugh has said, the list of topics with our recommendations and the possibility that, oh, good, we have it.
Oh my God.
Excellent. See, this is why we have Peggy with us. Oh, thank heaven, she keeps us
Although now,
organized.
Peggy, you have a long drive to get to Bennington.
To bed, I'm going to Boston after.
Well, no,
No,
I'm teasing.
Senator.
Oh.
Okay, so, yes, so the first one is settled. Now, is it a letter or a memo? I don't know what the difference would be there, but,
I think it's more of a formatting issue, so I don't think.
okay.
worry too much about it.
Which do you prefer?
I don't think it really matters. I think a memo would probably be sufficient if you're putting all of the committees on it.
I think a memo is fine.
It's up to you.
Okay.
Okay, we all, yeah, good, all right. Then on one comprehensive document or multiple documents containing targeted recommendations. I'm leaning toward Representative Pugh's suggestion that we just put it all into one. And then If we can identify those that fit better with one committee versus another, we can do
Yeah,
that.
I think a central document like that, and then you do a lead off to maybe a separate note to each committee and say, and here's the areas we think are yours.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's what you were thinking, huh?
Mhm.
Maybe what you do is you have the whole memo to everybody and you, on the front of it, you say, yeah, and by the way, here's what we think is yours with a cover sheet.
We could do that. That could maybe be taken care of just in the email, sending it to the committee.
Yep, because generally if you have an attachment, you do the cover sheet thing and,
Right.
but that's where you could lay out that here's the stuff we think is yours.
Okay. Anything else on sort of the recommendation? Just think of anything else you need from us, Katie, on that part?
And on that piece,
Good?
I'm good.
Okay,
And
go ahead.
I just say the issue that we just had now that and I plan on, and I think the two of us on this side both plan on, when you get the numbers back on where those young people are that that might have used that facility. With our appropriations hats, when we figure that out, this may go on now for a long time. And if this goes on for years, what's the budgetary implications for these? And what's the choices to be made around programmatically and financially for this?
This is reminding me of the people who don't have a home issue and who are homeless. It's going to be 5 to 7, whatever, to have enough affordable housing or whatever. So what do we do in the interim? Well, now for however many youth there are and will continue to be, what do we do in the interim?
And I might say this for me is even harder than that housing issue, because that housing issue, they can estimate when they might have a house to go into if you're turning it into permanent stuff and a timeline. We don't even have a timeline for any permanence now.
So before we dive into a more specific discussion of each of the topics, I would guess I would ask us collectively, and I'm including Ledge Council in that, to look at all the little bullets that are there, because this was drafted up earlier, and so there are other topics like parent-child centers and the bill that we've talked about, and then now the Beckett issue. What else can we add to this list? I put parent-child centers and I put Beckett. Are there other things that we want on the list?
Manhattan.
Kern-Hatton specifically, or?
No, the mandatory reporting and the oversight of boarding school.
Non-residential.
Non-res, yeah, you know the right term.
Resident.
Where there is no DCF oversight, the Department of
Yeah.
Education doesn't seem to really see their role as oversight of the boarding aspect.
I think Peggy may have sent you the email that we're looking at.
I did.
So it has a list and it does include that on the list.
Although behavioral concerns may not really address.
Not that one.
Oh, not that
It's
one.
the regulation and oversight of non-educational residential programs. So is it non-educational residential programs?
I think it should be non-educational components of residential programs.
Non-educational components. That's what I was thinking, whoa,
I hope they're educational.
we don't want to get into camps necessarily, but we might. Okay, so non-educational components of residential programs. It's there, Senator Sears. Okay. Okay, well, now, let's just take, is there anything within, is there anything else you want to add? Yes,
Do we want to specifically mention the Office of Child Advocate as a,
The bill, to add the bill, the Office of Child.
oh, add the bill, Office of Child Advocate, good idea.
as a,
That's what the after-school superhero has.
And we have to, whatever the after-school superhero
That's
suggests.
what we do.
I forgot my cape.
We're gonna have to coordinate.
Oh, God, I'm between two
You are
heroes.
surrounded. All right, okay, so Office of Child Advocate bill. I know what committee that goes to.
Sorry.
What else? Anything else?
And,
It's gonna be a long memo.
It will be a long memo. I don't think it will be a long memo. I think it will be.
I mean, there's a part of me that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5
Yeah.
in sentences.
Yes, that's what I think that it should look like. The question is, how detailed do we want to get? So we'll get to that question in just a minute, but go ahead.
did you say that you had added the parent-child centers, the S91 to the list
I
already?
did.
I thought you
S91,
had-
that's the bill, but parent-child
Yep.
centers also had other stuff, but it's in there.
Right.
And Beckett. Anything else? Katie, are we missing something? Michelle, are we missing something? She isn't gonna tell us because it makes it longer. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm kidding. Okay, now, as you look at each of the categories, Katie, can you kind of pull apart any of these and say, I mean, the question for me is how detailed do we get in the sentence that Representative Pugh is talking about? So do we get down into the weeds on this, or do we say generally, for example, please review, should we cite testimony that we've heard or people, we heard information, for example, from Amy Brady that I think really would inform the child advocate bill. So there's a paragraph in there that I thought was really outstanding in terms of that. So do we want to deep dive that deeply in, or how are we going to do that?
Well, I think that's a question for the committee, how
Yeah.
detailed you want to be, and it probably depends on the particular subjects. There might be some subjects where, you could kind of use one sentence and capture the consensus of the committee. You'd like a committee to take a look at this bill, or this amount of money is recommended for this particular program. I also think you can use links.
Oh, yeah.
There's testimony that you are wanting a different committee to see, we could just ask them to view this document.
Okay, and that's not too difficult for you to throw a link in there.
Nope.
Does that make sense? Okay. Then within each of these categories, is it time for us to start diving into them? What is your thought on that?
Question for you.
What do you think, committee? Should we start diving into the individual sections?
Sure.
All right, who wants to start on IT?
I can start. I would like to be tracking the cost and timelines related to the CCWIS, and maybe with a hyperlink to the testimony we heard from the advisory board, which I thought was really helpful.
The VCAV.
Yeah, VCAP.
So are you, so there's, okay, so that brings up another issue that we didn't talk about. So we're talking about committees of jurisdiction. But we could also be sending a request to AHS and DCF. Now, should we be doing that in this memo?
I think that is the committee's prerogative. There's nothing in your statute that says you should be writing a letter. There's nothing that says you can't be writing a letter to an agency. So I think it really depends what the committee's preference is. I did miss that statement though. So track costs and timelines of.
It's the CCWIS, it's the Child Welfare. I don't have it in front of me
That's
right
okay.
now.
I can look it up now that I have it.
Which one are you talking about?
The child, hold on,
Not VCAB.
is the Comprehensive Child Welfare Information System.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And that was the one that we heard the testimony on. And then the point that Senator Westman made about having the full scope of what in this case is DCF's IT to-do list, for lack of a better term, so that we have a sense of where things are slotted in terms of trying to track years, because the budget follows year by
I
year.
want to make sure that if I put that first on the list, I at least looked at what the other things are.
Got it.
It doesn't have to be detailed or anything, but I want to be able to say to people, this is the next big thing coming down the pike, and we're convinced of that. Very
Okay. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Thank you. All right. So what else on IT? As we're, I mean, let's go through and now we'll do sub lists. Or we got number one, A, B, C, D. What?
I was just gonna, as a backup to that, are they done the childcare? How far are they into the finishing the childcare, the new system?
The IT?
Yeah,
Well, I think they're in the first year, right?
Yes.
And then the next year, and I forget what they asked us for that.
I only bring that up because
Well,
our history, I'm gonna say that our history is not great in completing projects that are in budget.
Huh. So I think the question is this, well, not the question, but the concern, the concern is that we follow through, but also maybe there's a little umbrella, something we can say about identifying and accessing ARPA, or no longer ARPA,
I mean,
building back better. I mean, we don't want to get too far.
I mean, I'm wondering if part of what we want to say is that at minimum, 3 committees on each side, IT, I mean, whatever they're called, energy, approps, and well, whatever, need to come together, or need to work together and figure out what's going on with IT. I mean, I have no idea what's happening down the hall in terms of energy and technology on some level related to this. You know more about the funding. You knew about that ABC plan.
Because I saw work, to your point, I saw work, excellent work that was done in the energy and technology where they did a whole ranking. It was fascinating. It's incredible. And there's also something called JITOC, the Joint Information Technology something committee, and they're also putting eyes on, kind of like we're putting eyes on child protection.
So it may be a matter of communicating. Or it may be, it's like, it may be the silo issue that, say, government has that we need to unravel so that the legislature can have its appropriate role.
Is that what you're talking about?
No.
Yeah, I just mentioned that because it might give Ledge Council a place to go to where it's already all laid out, so you don't have to reinvent some of that.
Okay, so for IT, for me, I want to know that there's going to be a plan of integration of IT across departments and agencies. So I think we got some of that. It's a review of IT overall. And then the committees that are doing it are Commerce in the House and
No, it's energy and technology.
Energy and technology and finance, I guess. My committee. Big deal. Okay, and institutions, I think has a role to play, but I'm not.
I mean, there's
I'm
so
not-
many, I mean, every time we turn around, there's like a ton of committees.
Okay, let's not go that far. We'll think about the committees later. Let's just hold that. Okay, anything else on IT? So we have links to the VCAB testimony, and we have links to the other testimony, the parent-child talked about IT. So community involvement. And then we also have testimony from, they didn't send us written testimony. Peggy, can we get written testimony from Erica Radke and her crew on IT that we heard today? Because otherwise it's just testimony.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think
okay.
they sent anything to us that.
Then we'll have a link, something to hang a hat on. All right, so this is our first discussion. And then the next time we come in, we're gonna have to try to do some final work on the memo or letter, depending on what Katie decides. And my suggestion is, as we go through this, we'll do the best we can today, and then take some time before our next meeting, and maybe we'll have Katie send a preliminary memo out and then ask people to give further ideas and updates, so we can update it before we get back here and have an idea of what we want to do. Does that make sense to you?
It does, yeah.
All right, let's go to regulation and oversight of non-educational components of residential programs. This is going to be a tough one. And we have to look both at AOE and DCF for this one. So I'm very open to suggestions on this, and I personally think we need to have something with some teeth in it. I think the Office of Child Advocate fits within this as someone or an office that can provide oversight. But I also think that that should probably be in coordination with DCF. And then, as Senator Sears mentioned, to perhaps improve and update our mandatory reporting bill, statute. In terms of AOE, we saw the rule that the board put out that frankly, I was less than impressed by, but and maybe it means maybe we could go back and look at that, but I think we would like to have some role for our agency of education to play. I mean, obviously, when teachers are teaching kids, they're teaching them at a developmentally appropriate level.
Yeah.
And when these residential facilities have programs for counseling and other, I mean, how are they reviewed? I read the childcare rules the other day, as did Ann Pugh, Representative Pugh. And when you read through the childcare center rules, there's a whole section in there that is very explicit about what's important for kids and how they develop. And I think there might be something to learn from those rules. So from the childcare division. Okay, I'm rambling. What are folks thinking about?
I just
ahead.
think it should be examined. I don't know that I'm ready to say this, that, or whatever, but I think you're all on the right track. That it's a area that's not covered under current law. And I don't think I realized that until the current Hatton
Yeah.
When DCF stepped away, I didn't realize that all was left. Once they gave up
Nothing.
their residential treatment designation, they just have Department of Ed. And that's actually the State Board of Education. So it just worries me that parents send kids to there, or the state does, or whomever, and there's no oversight. I mean, I know what residential programs go through for licensing, and there's nothing there. And I think there would be a licensing component in somebody's bailiwick. Look at these.
So updating the licensure requirements and updating the
Yeah, I mean,
certification requirements, which would be education.
it's easy to call yourself a boarding school. Evidently.
Yes.
I think-
And I guess I'm concerned that, not just what happened at Kernhatten, but other places that the only oversight is over the educational portion of the program.
Right.
The education piece is certification in my mind. There's really no licensing component to this. The education people do the certification on whether you're doing classes. What Senator Sears is talking about is the licensing component that DCF would do is a true licensing component around safety and all of that for kids. And so I think we need to point out that there needs to be what I consider licensing versus a certification.
On the other hand, when you have a residential program acting in loco parentis, that somehow the agency of education needs to accept some responsibility for what's happening. I mean, you've got coaches, you have counselors, they're not all teachers, so they might double up. So I think there needs to be some evaluation of what AOE can do. They may need to link up with the Office of Child Advocate, or they may need to link up with DCF, but somehow, I agree with Senator Sears. I think we just send the general comment. This needs to be vastly improved.
I think that the comment should add that there is no reason to believe another Kernhatten could not happen.
Yep. Yes,
Without
Michelle.
some form of oversight.
Do you want to come up with Katie?
No, I'm good.
Okay. That was a very quick response.
We don't bite.
I just had a quick question about, follow up on Senator Sears' comment about mandatory reporting with regard to Kernhatten. I wasn't in on that issue before, but I was wondering about, is the issue, or was there testimony that because of the type of facility that they don't fit under the current definitions of 4913, and so they aren't qualifying as educators or counselors or things like that, and seeing
As I understand it, the issue was that once Kernhatten gave up their residential treatment program license, no longer was DCF involved, only the Agency of Education, which didn't look at the residential components of the program at Kernhatten, or for that matter, any other boarding school. So I didn't realize once they voluntarily gave up that designation as a residential treatment center, DCF was out the door. I mean, obviously, if there was a mandated reporter reported something, that DCF could get involved. But it would take a report, and I think we should be more cautious.
Well, and I think the issue around mandatory reporting came up because of events at Kernhatten.
Right.
And whether or not changes in statute would improve that process. So I don't know, we can answer the question. But it's just a question.
Right now, if somebody wanted to report, there's nobody to report to.
Well, there's a thought.
Well, they're required by statute in 33 VSA 4913, certainly, there's that long list.
Yeah.
Of people who have certain types of occupations, who work with kids, whether it's educators, camp counselors, coaches, things like that, that are required regardless of who your employer is or whether there's state oversight of your employer or anything like that. And so I'm just trying to understand.
But you're gonna report it to,
You're required to report to DCF.
DCF.
you report to DCF, but they have no license to revoke.
But they can still investigate and initiate
Right.
an assessment and then an investigation. I get your point. So it's really about the licensing, I think, less so than maybe the mandatory reporter statute.
It's about being able to be proactive rather than reactive. So if it's a mandatory report, then, you go in and you investigate. But our concern is there's no ongoing oversight. And part of that might be.
No license.
Yeah, no license. So it could, at one level, it could be, we'd like to have a license regardless of whether or not there are children in the custody of the state. That might be something, or there might be other less sophisticated options. Okay, where are we, Katie?
So I have all the comments on regulation of oversight. The mandatory reporting, I don't know if you want it mentioned or not, but the only comment that was made is that the statute needs to be improved or updated, which is general. Do you want a general statement or do you?
I think Senator Sears is interested in having
A
that.
general statement. Okay.
And because that will fall into two committees, so it falls into judiciary, it falls into health and welfare. What do other people think about the AOE DCF for residential?
I think somebody has to do it. I'm not ready to say it has to be DCF. Somebody needs to.
Somebody's got to do it.
Somebody's
I
got to
think
be responsible for the residential side.
Is there, I think that the education committees are very interested in evaluating this. So I think if we leave something in about education, they'll take it up, whether they do anything. Then the trouble is, it really does need to be coordinated, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay, we need somebody with a foot in both places. I don't know how to.
I would just say, if somebody sees something going wrong and they report it, I think they ought to report it someplace where they have some authority over them.
I agree.
And I don't.
And some ability to do something.
Yes, right now, because DCF doesn't, on the residential side, doesn't license for them, they're kind of, they're kind of out of their purview,
Mhm.
and they don't feel like, and that's not good.
So I think one primary consideration is that we would like to see some kind of involvement, either through licensure or some other regulatory mechanism.
What about OPR? Do they have capacity to OPR, Office of Professional Regulation? I don't know, that's a bit of a stretch because it's institutional in this case.
I don't know I don't know. What do you?
They do have a field team. I mean, to Senator Westman's point, the AOE right now is pulled in so many directions that.
So is DCF, but I mean, think about it. DCF gave Kern Hatton a license. All of this stuff came out, and it was pretty devastating what we heard about kids. And it's still being adjudicated, so we can't necessarily say it was yes or no, but DCF no longer licenses Kern Hatton. AOE certified Kern Hatton. And then Kern Hatton said, no, we don't have that kind of treatment at our school, so we don't, that was for DCF, Marty. They took that away. We don't have kids, we don't have treatment. Took that license away. And AOE has decertified, I don't know, they haven't decertified, but there's I forget how it's worded, but they no longer have oversight.
It seems that they have the lowest or the lightest touch of oversight. There are different layers within the potential types of oversight that AOE can have. And I believe that AOE has sort of the lightest touch of regulation right now. And as you heard, that doesn't include anything except just the educational component.
Yes, yeah, I got. So I guess the question we ought to send to, I guess, to the education committees, because we're not going to resolve it, is how would you provide non-educational residential oversight for residential schools programs?
And I think the state Board of Ed had that
That it was
tablet plan to have them, I don't know if I want to call it self-certify that their residential programs are up to standard of that.
Oh, I'm not into self-certification in this.
No, I know, but that was
No.
what we heard from from Emily Simmons about what the Board of Ed's plan was to deal with.
They had that new rule.
Right,
That
new
was
rule.
less than stellar.
Agreed with that.
That was well said.
Big play.
Well, one way to do this would be to introduce a bill that puts the Agency of Education in responsibility for oversight of residential programs within educational institutions that they do. You could introduce a bill and then it automatically at least raises the issue. I'm just not sure how to write the bill, but.
Well,
I know.
somebody might write that bill, but we need to put into the memo something that says the AOE or DCF should accept responsibility for, but I guess my question is this. And I'll let the committee say yay or nay, but do you agree that both the Agency of Education and the Department of Children and Families should have a role to play in oversight of kids in these residential facilities?
That are not licensed by DCF currently.
Yeah,
Or is it, I mean, is part of the question that right now DCF has the authority to reply to individual complaints of abuse and neglect, but there's no one currently who has the ability or authority to look at a pattern and create a response to residential programs. And so is that, I mean, does that have to be Department of Ed? Should that stay with DCF? I mean, is the question, how do we give someone, some entity? My question is that what we're trying to get at? That right now
Yes.
there is no one.
well, I'm not looking necessarily at someone. I'm looking at entities that have
Well, so it's
some
someone being an
knowledge. I mean, I'd like to see both of them working together and with a child advocate to oversee some of this.
I totally agree with that because it's really two components here. And I think they should work together with the child advocate.
How do
I
we
wanna know-
coordinate? We're talking about how do we coordinate oversight for an educational institution that has children in a residential?
Well, I think there's more, isn't it more than coordination? It is who
Oh,
can
yeah.
respond, who can respond to patterns in a residential or other non-DCF licensed.
Yeah, so
program.
once you're coordinated, then you have certain authority. You have the authority to collect data. You have the authority to evaluate trends over time, and you have the authority to intervene and
You have
whatever you need to
you have
do
the
to make
authority that if somebody,
Somebody has to.
somebody calls up and says there's abuse in this particular situation, that the institution could lose its license.
Yes, so do they have, so, yes. Okay, so let's ponder on this one. So is it a matter of saying everybody has to have a license and hold that up? And we do know how many of these residential pools and facilities there are in the state. We have that from Jim, right?
I think you have it from the agency. but-
From the agency.
So,
yes.
is this something that we want to, between now and the end of December, define and figure out? Or is this something that we want to say to committees of jurisdiction? This is the question we want you to figure out.
Yeah, we do. I think that the latter. I think, though, we want the committees of jurisdiction to
Okay.
figure it out, but we don't want to say it's one or the other. I'm trying to figure out if the education committee is working and your committee is working, we don't want to have two different solutions appear. Or do we? I mean, that's one of the problems we've seen. Now, nobody's in charge. And when DCF was in charge, they were in charge of the kids and licensure. And AOE was just certifying what they were doing.
Well, so
I'm
now
not sure.
I'm probably going off from what we're talking about.
Okay.
But Kern-Hatton is the issue and we're calling it a residential program.
Mm.
There's program, the Sally Smith residential program with, the Sally Smith Drug and Alcohol Program, facility for youth.
Mhm.
And oops.
Mhm. I know.
There's some, and so, is it that we want to do it program specific, or do we want to give? Well, I'm now going down the road of what may be a solution, which maybe no one wants, which is giving DCF the ability to respond to, if patterns of abuse continue.
Right,
On the-
but
on the
they had that
residential side.
authority
Yeah.
and nothing happened except licensure.
Oh, I see, because while DCF did respond and they pulled the license,
Didn't do anything to,
the Department of Ed said, that's okay. This is a school and it can continue to operate as a school.
I think that I think it's just clearly stating the current Hatton issue and asking committees to look at how they should be best dealt with in the future, because there is no oversight over the residential program.
so Katie, can you solve this problem for us?
Along with everything else
Oh
we'll put
my
in your lap.
God, okay, this is not easy. Can you please think about this and then let's come back to it. Let's leave it for a minute. Let it fester, digest. So the Families First program. So the suggestion, I think Kate, as Katie and I were talking, I think this was her suggestion to provide some updates. Because I don't know that we want to go in and change the plan necessarily. What do you think about what is there in terms of providing updates?
I think the committees of jurisdiction should get updates on a regular basis on the progress or lack thereof implementation of family first programs, any problems that developed either due to the federal regulations or because of other factors such as COVID.
Is that good with everybody? Okay, thank you, Katie. All right, and on the child placement issues vis-a-vis the UVM report, and we did hear today a comment about how the younger workers were more apt to separate children and the older workers were more apt to conform to the stay with the family, philosophy. I guess we would ask that the results of the UVM report be reviewed and with possible suggestions for, I think of training, ongoing training to ensure that, or somehow that have the department or Family Services Division have a concrete policy that can be maintained over time, so some training or something,
Or update,
or updates.
because
Yeah,
if I,
yeah.
I would have to relook at that, their presentation again. The majority of their suggestions appeared to be at the agency policy level as contrasted to a need to change laws. There
Yeah.
might be something for Representative Jessup and Senator Westman to do in terms of where money goes. But I wasn't necessarily, if I recall, I would have to look at again, most of their
You're right, yeah, you're right.
conclusions of, besides the IT. I mean, their big conclusion was it's really impossible to get the data.
I'd be also interested in the geographical or where kids are more likely to be removed from homes, and there may be districts where it's more likely, districts where it's less likely. And I think that when this goes to in justice reinvestment and in judiciary, the Judiciary Committee, we've been looking at the impact of Raise the Age and other things. And what we're seeing is such a wide disparity from jurisdiction to jurisdiction in how kids are dealt with and how. So I would guess it's probably the same within the DCF realm, where certain districts have much higher rates of kids being placed in custody versus kinship care, etc.
So, and so along those lines, then, this report research came to us as a result of a grant. And I'm wondering if appropriations might evaluate, and in conjunction with other committees, evaluate the need for further evaluation. Or if that data can be readily available, as you said, from DCF and their geographic distribution. Okay. Can look at that. Getting easier for that. Okay, but now I'd like to jump to Beckett. And the reason being that it fits in with the kids who have behavioral concerns or mental health issues. Mental health isn't there, but it should be. Not involved in the judicial system, and Beckett is specifically designed for a secure facility, a safe therapeutic facility for kids who have been adjudicated. So what do we want, what, if anything, we want to say about, a lot to say.
Well, I think whether it's reports or regular updates, but we need a plan from the department about what they're going to do for the next 4 years while they figure out they figure out what's going to happen and how we are going to house, treat the what, for lack of a better term, those youth who used to be at Woodside.
Yes, but my concern continues to be the kids that are not necessarily remanded to Woodside, but the kids who.
Those are two different sets of kids.
I know that, and right now they're putting, some of those kids are slated to go to Beckett. And so my concern is that we have facilities and treatment programs for kids who are not.
Or see, I didn't realize that they were going to go.
Did we hear that in the Justice Oversight Committee? Because I keep asking the same question.
I don't remember that. I
Well,
think
we're gonna get the information from Commissioner Brown by December 1st, so that'll help us.
that I thought it was kids who were adjudicated delinquent with serious emotional and mental health problems who may have previously weren't allowed to go to Woodside because of the federal court ruling. With those are the kids I think we're talking about. They may have been adjudicated delinquent, but their behavior is either extremely emotional disturbance or mental health.
So then the other question I have is, as Commissioner Brown was talking today, he talked about traveling staff.
Yeah,
And
that's a new one.
that's a really new, that's a new, and it's probably expensive. And my question is, the permanency of staff and staffing positions, because that becomes critically important when you're working with children, especially. So something to just, I think, get committees to evaluate what's happening there. That's part of the plan, I guess, the planning process.
Well, they're trying to, because of COVID and because of the, there's workforce crisis everywhere, but particularly acute in human services. My understanding is residential programs are having a huge crisis in terms of getting staff. And these people are similar to traveling nurses, but they're not, obviously they're not nurses.
Right.
I didn't even know there was such.
No, that's the first time I heard it, and it struck me. I didn't follow up with questions,
Well,
but
I'd heard it at the program in Bennington. They're having some come in, but they'll be more, for example, they're not allowed to initiate restraints or anything like that. They're more or less helping the staff.
I mean, I don't know if it goes to, it's less the, I understand that Jared House and so 2 places at least across the state that were crisis beds for youth are now 5 days a week. You can't have a crisis on the weekend.
oh, good,
Because of staffing issues. And so this may be something.
right. Evaluate.
Now, this goes back to when I began my social work career at a residential treatment center, that because of budgetary and other things, went to 5 days a week, and the kids on the weekend went to visiting friends if they couldn't go home.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so we, immediately the commissioner said they're now going to make appeal, and it will be at least 6 months before they can do the appeal. And the question from Representative Pugh was, what's your backup plan?
What's plan B? We don't want to know.
What's plan B? How do we say something about ferreting out what plan B might be?
So that's a good question to ask committees of jurisdiction. Oh,
Sorry, but I just see, and it's an automatic response from the commissioner that they were going to appeal. And at this point, the lingering question for me in my mind is it worth it?
And you got to remember, it's 6 months after the appeal. If they won the appeal, you still got all the construction and everything that would have to go on there. And now it's higher than the 3 million that they estimated earlier, he said, and didn't give us a number.
Yeah.
But so, no.
and we had Windsor sitting there.
Yeah, will we ever see a Beckett? That's the question. In Newbury.
Yeah. So some committee needs to, is
The
this
plan, the Beckett plan, I think, is absolutely key.
I think that Judiciary and Health and Welfare, at least in the Senate, should look at that.
We could do something together and make it happen.
I think we should really.
And when you make it happen, you just tell the House, please.
Or you can come.
Well, you can join us.
You guys
The more
I
the
get
merrier.
confused I get the Judiciary Committee or the Institutions Committee in the House along with the Human Services Committee. Who would we
Well,
be?
you know, there's fewer, I think the Senate should come with a wonderful plan that we can, work with.
Well, that you can
Okay.
pick apart.
Never, Senator.
This is what I like about Friday afternoons. Oh. All right, let's move along. Katie, are we making any progress?
Yes.
She's like, glad I
Yes, yes.
The last two items was the issue about the Office of Child Advocate. I know there was already a comment under the residential, non-educational component of residential programs, that could potentially be a resource. I don't know if you want to have a standalone statement about the Office of Child
I
Advocate.
think just on the bill, to encourage that the bill be taken up and evaluated as its significance for oversight of non-educational or educational residential programs. Now that I gotta get rid of that non in there.
So that should be a.
Well, I think I fully support the Committee of Jurisdiction.
Oh, God, wait a minute.
Job.
And in the meantime, that the Human Services shall evaluate the regulation and oversight of educational components of residential programs. I think we're gonna have a lot of roads crossing in the middle of the night. Yes. Does that make sense? Are we all set with that then? Yeah. Okay. And then the money from appropriations for the Office of Child Advocate is what is going to be interesting, because we also then have parent-child centers in S91.
What do you want to say about the?
What do you want to say about that?
That it should be considered?
Yeah.
What was that? I didn't hear.
Well, it's a big bill and you know, there's a lot to it. And there are elements, there's a lot of financing that would have to go on, appropriations that would have to go on, but there are components that, that's why I asked the question about the administrative piece and the networking. And then I think the ask really isn't that significant. I think it might be like $1 million for the next year to accomplish their goals. So we'll have to, we'll ask committees of jurisdiction to look at S91 and then what did the parent-child centers get last year? I think they got 3.7 or something like that.
Yeah, they got.
And then what do they need to carry forward, go forward with the plan process? But I think the work that parent-child centers do and potentially can do is significant for prevention. Do we want to link them in any way to other things like access to data, IT?
Family first.
Very potentially.
But not yet.
And we're now putting lots of recommendations and my tiny brain is having trouble remembering all of them. And if I recall, we're going to get a draft.
Yeah.
We can then discuss
Yeah.
and finite make other changes.
That makes sense? Yeah. Okay, so would you mind? Can you? Is it
She absolutely
possible?
can. It's will she?
I know, that's the question. Without comment
Sorry.
from no one else, just let Katie go through what she thinks, where we are, briefly. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. Briefly.
Okay. So the committee has decided to go with a memo, and it's going to be one comprehensive memo to all of the committees that might be impacted. I was going to start with lead-in language about how there are multiple issues within this list of recommendations that cross jurisdictional line and will require coordination for multiple committees. And then I was going to go into each of the recommendations and sort of kind of break the letter up with headings, topic headings, and then have the specific recommendations underneath. So with regard to IT, the committee is interested in tracking the cost and timelines of the Comprehensive Child Welfare Information System and include a link to VCAD there. There'll be language that multiple committees from each chamber need to come together to understand the progress of the IT system that DCF is putting together. And I think this goes the same thing. There's a comment about unraveling silos so the legislature can have an appropriate role. So that's the idea of working together. And you also mentioned linking testimony that you've asked Deputy Commissioner Bradkey to submit from today. So if I receive that, I will add a link there. Why don't I pause? Does that sound right so far for IT? Did I miss anything? Okay. Next was the regulation and oversight of non-educational components of residential programs. I think where we are is making kind of general statements of that this particular topic needs to be covered as it's not by multiple committees, as it's not an area that's currently covered under the law. We need more oversight. Potentially the Office of Child Advocate could provide that site, and AOE and DC, there should be discussion or examination of whether AOE and DCF, how they should coordinate to provide that oversight.
This is something that we're all gonna have to think about and then send a little note out to Katie as we see the draft to do that thinking.
Did I capture the idea so far, sort of
Yes.
general? Okay.
Great. Did you say something about one point of responsibility? I mean, that was Senator Westman's
No,
concern.
but I can add that.
Yeah, okay.
And then for mandatory reporting, I was just gonna do one sentence that says it needs to be reviewed and updated. Okay, next was families first, and this will just be a short section that the committees of jurisdiction should receive ongoing updates about the progress and any problems that are coming up with regards to the rollout. Child placement. So this suggestion is that the results of the UVM report be reviewed by the committees of jurisdiction with suggestions for ongoing training. And there's also a suggestion that there needs to be geographic distribution data about where kids are more likely to be removed from their home and where placements are being made, if it's more custody or kinship care. So I will try to capture that. And then Beckett, I'm going to note that they're 6 months before the appeal and the committee is concerned what the plan B might be. And that the committee is concerned about the kids who would have been at Woodside, how are they being housed, and what type of treatment are they getting in the interim. Okay, and then there seems to be a new section that you added about workforce shortage and just referencing the conversation about traveling staff and asking the committees of jurisdiction to evaluate what's happening and to acknowledge that there's a crisis across all human services.
Okay. And how they're being used. I mean, we don't have a facility, so where are they? This is really interesting to me.
Okay.
They're not in foster homes.
And then the Office of Child Advocate, I'm just going to mention that the bill, the committees of jurisdiction are encouraged to take up the bill and to evaluate the role that the advocate might play in oversight of programs like the non-educational components of residential programs. And lastly is the PCCs and encouraging committees to take up S91 and linking to that testimony.
Cool. Okay, so that's where we are right now. Any additions, corrections at this point? We've done a lot. It's a lot. And, you know, let's hope that 1/3 of it can be followed through with in the session, or all of it would be great. So our little homework assignment will be, Katie, you take some time, and when's our next meeting?
December.
I don't think there's another one on the books, to be honest with you.
I wasn't sure off the top of
I
my
don't,
head.
I don't have any other one in the books.
Oh, how do we want to meet? It's a letter.
Do you want to meet in person, or is it, are there edits that can be made by sending the document around?
We could, let's think about this. How much time will it take? So after Thanksgiving, you're sometime, I got the little calendar out.
How long will it take? If I have a consistent kind of period of time, I could probably do it in a day or two. I'm not sure if the special session is intended to go more than a day, so I think that is sort of the wild card.
So I'm thinking, what this looks like. So somewhere in the first week of December, you think you'd have a,
I would hope I would have it for that.
oh, well, Thanksgiving is coming up. Okay. So then, if we could see the draft letter, and then we'll give ourselves, we'll give us as a committee a couple of days to review the letter and get back to Katie. Can we do this from afar? Or would you like to meet by Zoom briefly? We're not allowed to meet by Zoom and make decisions. I'm sorry, that's the joint committee rules. So we have a choice of,
I have a,
what's your suggestion? Help.
well, if we meet by Zoom, we can't take a vote, but we can either by Zoom or by piece of
I
paper.
don't think we can even meet by
Oh, we
Zoom.
can't even
I
meet
don't
by
know,
Zoom?
can the,
think the house, I don't believe you guys
I don't think we can meet by Zoom.
So is it heresy to say that we meet the first day we get back in January? Do we have to meet?
Well,
Are
I'm
you
thinking,
looking for us?
here's what I'm thinking. Good, you just solidified it. If we communicate with Katie about the letter and make some grammatical edits, maybe there are some things that we'd like to see changed. And we can send our suggestions to Katie, then you can send us the next draft. We'll do that no more than twice, probably need to do it once. And then in order for us to send the letter out, we do have to vote in person. So what we'll do is we'll set a time. The first day we're back or the second day we're back, and we'll meet up in the Senate cloakroom, or we'll meet in the cafeteria.
Guess what, we'll have to, yes, and we'll have to define that,
Right, define what?
where we're meeting and.
I know, we
time.
have to say where we're meeting. Well, my committee room holds 16 people, so we could meet and.
Well, her room's bigger than yours.
And her room, she can hold 19.
Yeah,
18.
Oh, 18, okay.
Well, that
we'll
may
sort
have
that out.
changed. That may have changed. I looked on Friday outside my committee room and it said occupancy of 5.
It says 18 now.
It's
Oh, it does?
18 now.
I don't know how the hell they're gonna get 18 people in there.
Thankful, that's Alice's coat closet. Okay, all right, so we can do that. Then we'll set a time and a place, definitive time and place for us to meet. And it will be the first day or the second day of the session to approve or not approve the memo letter. Does that work for people? Is that legitimate, do you think? I'm looking at Michelle. Okay,
Because the
looking at
letter will be
Katie.
posted, the letter will be
Everything will be
posted on the
Can I ask
agenda.
the question? Why does the house hate Zoom so much?
I don't know, but it's really great. Why does the house hate Zoom so much?
I like Zoom better than Teams.
Me too.
Me too, but
And I like.
I don't like either one of them, but, you know, an hour meeting would, to discuss the letter wouldn't have been horrible.
So Katie, is this good with you?
It is.
All right, so we'll communicate. And Michelle?
Or just when you're done, I just wanted to
I
say
just
something.
think the meeting
Okay, okay.
is
Are we good then, committee?
Yes.
All
Yep.
right, so, oh, thank you. Since this is our last meeting, but it's not really our last meeting. I can say thank you at our next meeting, but I want to say thank you right now because I think you've all helped significantly. And these are difficult issues. And I really appreciate the time and energy that you put into this. Thank you.
Thank you for your leadership.
Yes, thank you for your leadership, Senator Lyons.
Thank you. Okay.